Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to the final webinar in this series, Unearthing Gold Histories. My name is Maddie Moore, and I'm the Advocacy Strategic Manager at the National Trust of Australia Victoria and the coordinator of the Australian Heritage Festival in Victoria. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm hosting this meeting from the lands of the Wurundjeri people. I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the various lands on which you all join us today. I pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and acknowledge their continuing connections to land, waters, and community. This webinar, Unearthing Gold Histories, is being run in partnership with the Victorian Goldfields World Heritage bid as part of the 2025 Australian Heritage Festival. Each year, the National Trust, the state's premier community-based heritage advocacy organisation, coordinates the Australian Heritage Festival in Victoria, providing a program of internally and externally produced events. Running from the 18th of April until the 18th of May, the festival is the state's largest annual celebration of heritage, and in 2025, the Australian Heritage Festival is supported by the Heritage Council of Victoria and the Victorian Goldfields World Heritage bid. Today's talk on the Victorian Goldfields World Heritage bid will explore the rich cultural and historical significance of this remarkable landscape. You'll be hearing from members of the Victorian Goldfields World Heritage bid team, who will share insights into the collaborative efforts, challenges faced, and the vision for safeguarding this vital part of Australia's history for future generations on the journey to securing World Heritage status. I'll now hand over to Lana Epstein to take it away.
Welcome everyone. My name is Lana Epstein. I'm the World Heritage Engagement Officer with the City of Ballarat. Today our webinar covers Unearthing World Heritage, Victorian Goldfields World Heritage bid, and our journey so far. Thank you for joining us. Today we have Susan Fyard from City of Ballarat and Trevor Budge from City of Greater Bendigo, who have been part of this project. They have been leading it for quite some time to bring it to where we are. Thank you for joining us, and we'll start our presentation now. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the country that we're on today and all the traditional owners of the Victorian Goldfields. We recognise their resilience and the culture and tradition which is present today. We acknowledge their unique role in the life of this region, and we also recognise their unbroken connection to country and that sovereignty has never been ceded. For this project, we also recognise that the gold rushes occurred on traditional country all over the world.
Thanks, Lana. I wanted to introduce our partners to you. My name is Trevor Budge. I work at the City of Greater Bendigo and I've been on the project for a number of years. This is a partnership between 15 councils, which extend across the Victorian Goldfields, mainly concentrated in central Victoria, but also councils in the east of Victoria. We've been very fortunate to have two co-patrons join the project some years ago, the Honourable John Brumby AO and the Honourable Dennis Napthine AO, who've, although they're from different sides of politics, have been very, very supportive of the project and can see the long-term benefits of the project and have worked tirelessly with us to bring us to this stage. We also have other agencies that we work with. Heritage Victoria is a lead agency. The Victorian government gave this project $2 million in May 2023, and that brought Heritage Victoria on the journey. As you can see, we also work with our Commonwealth partners, because it's the Commonwealth Government which will have to present the World Heritage nomination to the World Heritage Committee. Jar Jar Rung is a full partner on the project working group. They've played an important role because, as you'll hear, they have one of the proposed sites. We also have Chief Advisor Barry Gamble. Barry is a UK-based person, but has been to the Victorian Goldfields many times, has worked on over 20 successful World Heritage nominations over the last 20 years, and you'll hear some further comments about Barry's work. So we might go to the next slide. So you may be quite familiar with World Heritage, and perhaps you're more familiar perhaps with some of the outstanding sites around the world. We've now got over 1,200 sites globally, and Australia is well represented with 20 sites, many of them which the viewers would be quite familiar with, such as Uluru, the Royal Exhibition Buildings in Melbourne, Budgebim Cultural Landscape Site in southwest Victoria. One site that is a bit similar to what we're putting forward for the Victorian Goldfields is the convict sites, and that's because they straddle Australia and including Norfolk Island, and it's a series of sites, and this is how we'll explain what we're doing in the Victorian Goldfields. So it's a very different type of bid. Now, as well as the 20 properties that Australia already has, Australia has a series of properties on what's called the tentative list. Tentative list is a placeholder which allows you to signify to the rest of the world that you're on the journey towards World Heritage listing. You have to be on the tentative list for a year, and once you're on that tentative list, you can then work towards your nomination, which is what we're doing right now. Important to realise what is the significance of World Heritage listing. Some people believe that it somehow means that the UNESCO or United Nations interferes with the laws of the land. No, it doesn't. What actually happens is that the same provisions that exist at the moment continue to exist, and whoever's the relevant bodies, whether it be the federal, state or local government in terms of limits for development and so on, that continues. Importantly, the World Heritage Committee can only really do one thing, and that's to add properties to the list. But occasionally they have actually acted and removed properties from the list, and we have 3 properties that have been taken off the list in the last 50 years because they simply weren't able to sustain the values that put the properties on in the first place. So we might move to the next slide. So here's Barry Gamble, who I referred to. Barry was required as part of the project, and all World Heritage nominations have to do what's called a comparative analysis. They have to compare what we're putting forward with if you like to put it this way, the rival projects and products and sites around the world. Now, what we know about the Victorian Goldfields is that they were an amazing event in Australian terms, but they're an amazing event in world terms. To give you some concept of what was involved, in the 1850s, there was as much gold produced by Victoria and California. The 2 sites almost produced the same amount of gold, but between them, they produced more gold than was produced in the previous 3,000 years of human history. So the scale was extraordinary. And of course, that attracted huge numbers of people, mass migration to Victoria. We've documented that during that 1850s, about 600,000 people came to Victoria, driven obviously by gold mining. Now, what Barry's had to do is in order to prepare our statement of outstanding universal value, he's had to do a comparative analysis by looking at all the major gold fields in the period that we're looking at, which is 1850 to 1900. So as well as California, there were extensive gold fields, as people will know, across many parts of Australia. Otago in New Zealand, Klondike in Alaska, on the border of Canada and Alaska, Siberia, South America, Africa, and so on. Barry's looked at all those gold fields. In fact, he's looked at about 43 gold fields around the world. And because of what we've got in the Victorian goldfields in terms of the surviving gold rush landscape of mining areas, buildings, towns, etc., Barry's come to the conclusion, which is stated there, the most extensive, coherent and best surviving gold rush landscape anywhere. And it's on that sort of basis that we can make a nomination which we're pretty confident we can be successful at. So we'll go to the next slide.
Trevor, and thanks, Lana. I'm going to just provide a bit of a background to the World Heritage bid, and it's been going for a very, very long time, over 30 years. And initially, it was the focus of the bid was very much around the history and the heritage, which it still is, but the objects and the archaeology and the places. Over time, particularly as many different stakeholders have become involved and as local governments have really started to drive this in about 2019, the focus has started to change to be very much on communities and benefits for communities. Even the more stakeholders that we work with, such as First Peoples and others, this understanding of a human and cultural story that needs to be told as part of this bid. And most recently with the Victorian government, there's a gender equity lens coming onto this story as well, around the stories of women and children and others. So this has evolved over time. So it's just not a whole heap of events, but the actual meaning and what we're delivering through the World Heritage Bid is changing. Thanks, Lana. The partnership that Trevor mentioned earlier about the local governments, but also includes state governments, community groups and others, First Peoples, has really shifted in terms of this vision. So we want to get World Heritage listing. That's the common element that hasn't changed. But what we're looking at is how do we share this story with people across the globe and bring real meaningful benefits to local communities. Some of the local communities across this region do have some challenges. If we go to the next slide, I'll talk more about that there. This map here is showing the 15 local government areas. So these 15 local governments are involved. Some of these areas are doing okay, but others have some real challenges, as I mentioned. So the World Heritage provides probably an unrivaled opportunity to bring benefits to those communities. The bid initially started on the 13 LGAs in the central Victorian Goldfields, that big gold blob in the middle, but more recently is expanded to Indigo Shire up in the northeast, which has places like Beechworth and Borbor down in the Gippsland area, which has an amazing place called Walhalla, because we know that the stories of those places are absolutely crucial on that international comparative analysis. So it's a big region that we've been studying and working with, and we're trying to hone down into what areas within there could be on the World Heritage List. Thanks, Lana. This is the time frame that we're working to. As we mentioned, it's been going on for a long time, but most recently, in February this year, the Australian government put the Victorian Goldfields on Australia's World Heritage tentative list, and Trevor will talk a little bit more about that, what that means in a minute. At the same time, we've been developing up these master plans to look at where the investment needs to go across the region to really uplift this area, bring benefits to communities, and also manage the tourism that will come from World Heritage. We know that it's going to give us a huge global profile and will refocus both domestic and international tourists on this region. The nomination itself can't happen for at least 12 months after tentative listing. And at this stage, we're working towards a deadline of putting a nomination into UNESCO on the 1st of February next year. It goes through an 18-month assessment process with experts and others who assess what we put forward and any changes that might need to be made through that stage. And then if anything's going to happen, we hope that we'll be able to put a World Heritage nomination forward to the World Heritage Committee in about mid-2027. So it's not that far off in the future, and that's the earliest we can put up a nomination. Thanks, Lana.
So what is the World Heritage tentative list? It's a placeholder. Australia has a process whereby you can't, as Sue has mentioned, you can't nominate until you've been on the tentative list for at least a year. Currently, there are 9 properties on the tentative list. They're listed on the right-hand side of the screen. We're the most recent listing. You can simply Google World Heritage tentative list Australia, and you'll be able to read a document of about 12, 14 pages, which sets out the detail of why we've put forward the tentative listing for the Victorian Goldfields. It's an important step because World Heritage Committee wants to see that property being on the tentative list for a year. Some people have asked us, does the World Heritage tentative list have a legal status? Well, it actually has none, because there's no reference to it in any legislation at the state or federal level. It's a convenience, it's a placeholder, it's something that's required under the UNESCO World Heritage listing process. So tentative listing itself is important, but it doesn't have a legal implication. So if we go to the next slide, thank you, Lana. This gives you a picture of what is actually on the tentative list, and also gives you the methodology that we're using. So I mentioned before that in contrast to many World Heritage sites in Australia and around the world, which are a single site, in the case of the Victorian Goldfields, what we're putting forward is what's called a serial listing approach. Serial listing means that we have a series of component areas which individually would probably not be able to qualify for World Heritage listing. It's the totality of what we're putting forward. It's the fact that collectively a group of sites are able to tell so many stories, whether it's about mining, whether it's about First Peoples, whether it's about the extraordinary cities and towns that were built. Sue's mentioned already that, the role of women and children across the landscape, which led to things like schools being built, town halls, law courts, and so on, very early in the gold rush period. So by the mid-1850s, only 3 or 4 years after the gold rush has started, we've already got settlements built across this landscape. So what we do is we take as Barry calls it, the best of the best. How do we tell that story with a series of sites? At the moment, you can see the map indicates 9 sites. We might end up with more. The process of tentative listing allows you to add more sites. So the sites that are in dark blue are the sites that are formally listed in the tentative list. The sites that are in green are nominated in the tentative list as places that are likely to come on board. We had to grab a time slot, which meant that whatever we had prepared had to be ready for that 1st of February listing earlier this year. But more work is done on each of these sites, and also on the potential for other sites. Now, if you go onto the tentative listing and you have a look at the sites, what they are is a single coordinate on a map, and that's all you need for tentative listing. What we're working on at the moment is what is the component area in those particular vicinities of those coordinates. What's the component area that we should put forward which tells that story? And as you can see, they're a combination of mining sites, but also townships. And they're also highlighting some extraordinary activity that's happened across the goldfields. So it wasn't just one type of mining. We have all 6 types of major gold mining activity around the world is represented across the Victorian goldfields. And some of those are quite unique in the sense of the size of the nuggets. And I'll pick up the one there on the top left-hand corner, the Great Nuggets Historic Landscape, which of course was the site of the discovery of the world's largest gold nugget found in a place called Malagal. And then we've got other sites where there was major mining and very large long-term deep mining was undertaken. So you can see the concept is you bring together a representative sample of the best and call that a serial listing, and then the total of all that tells the story. So I might go to the next slide. Thanks, Lana. So here's one of our sites, and this is a very interesting site. And Sue has already mentioned that term. We're looking at a cultural landscape, the landscape of the goldfields. Some of those areas would be well known to people. They often occurred in things like the box ironbark forests, low rainfall areas with very deep mining. Others occurred in this volcanic landscape, which we see between Bendigo and Ballarat, extends across the Western Victorian volcanic plain. And what happened here is volcanoes that were active around 20, 30,000 years ago poured their lava into the valleys, into the creek valleys. Those creek valleys were then buried under a quite substantial amount of material, but those valleys actually still had gold in them. And that led to one of the areas that we're looking at, and that's the Creswick deep lead mining landscape, where they simply drilled down through that volcanic coverage and found the gold in the ancient, what they call buried rivers of gold. This is a view from Mount Franklin, Loganbook, which was one of the significant volcanoes in the area. It's also a volcanic cone, which is of great significance to the Jarrah. And Jarrah's done a lot of work on this, and because it was also associated with a protectorate station at a place called Franklin Ford nearby, there's been a huge amount of cultural values assessment undertaken in this area to determine its significance in terms of First Peoples. And this is one of our tentative list sites. And I think this has been a very significant element in the whole project, that we've now moved to a situation where First Peoples are not just simply being represented by the site, they're actually a full partner in the project. JARA has identified other important sites which will form small parts of components of bigger sites. So this is a journey that we're on with traditional owners right across the Victorian goldfields. So might go to the next slide. Thanks, Lana. So just exemplifying this issue, that what we're dealing with is a landscape made of many things. So obviously the geology itself is important because of the geology that created the gold in the first place. Gold found in different ways, sometimes very deep in quartz, sometimes lying on the surface. But that whole ecological, geological story is part and parcel of our World Heritage listing. It created the cultural landscape where even our First Peoples actually observed some of that volcanic activity. We're on the country of traditional owners. What we find in many of the alluvial workings is there still remains of things like, whether it's scar trees, whether it's wells that were carved out of the granite for drinking purposes. There are signs right throughout the landscape that we're dealing with here of First Peoples occupation, which from what we can gather was around about 33,000 years. UNESCO now wants to recognise that First Peoples story, and we found that the First Peoples story is not just about the background in geology, but First People were very active in every element of gold mining. They took miners to show them where gold was. They rescued miners who were lost. They participated in gold mining themselves, and they were even present at Eureka Stockade. Now, that mass migration also gave us this extraordinary diverse cultures that came. Chinese people were involved in virtually every major gold mining area in the world. They were in extraordinary numbers in the Victorian goldfields, and in the 1850s, in some places, they were 1/4 of the population of some of the major gold rushes. So they've left an indelible mark, which we've still got those markers, and they'll form some of the component areas that we'll be listing. So we might go to the next slide. Thanks, Lana. So whether we're talking about on the top left, the Creswick Deep Lead remains, which shows one of these 6 types of gold mining that we've got, or whether we have something like the supporting industries, and the slide in the centre is of the Malmesbury Viaduct, which is the rail line from Melbourne to Bendigo, an extraordinary piece of construction in itself. But in the foreground is the image of the Coloburn water system, which starts at Malmesbury of Malmesbury Reservoir. This is a 70-kilometre water system that was built in the 1860s to bring water to the goldfields. They wouldn't have thrived without that water system. We're in a very dry landscape. Barry Gamble, in looking at that, has identified for us and said there are 3 great water systems in the world that were built to support gold mining, support mining generally. And you have one of them. And the Coloburn system is an important part of going forward with the nomination. And then, of course, we have scores of settlements, scores of towns, some of which are bigger than what you see in the image. Some of them are much smaller than the buildings you see in the image. They represent all the different stages of the rapid construction of these towns. And they built a social infrastructure that sits behind it. So whether that's with things like churches, whether it's schools, whether it's hospitals, they literally built what we often refer to as instant cities. So we might go to the next slide, please.
Thanks, Trevor and Lana. So one of the questions we get asked a lot is, will World Heritage lock up the goldfields? And this is something that Heritage Protection often gets asked. The short answer is no. Heritage across this region and the places that we're looking at have been protected for many years, in fact, some for decades. So we know that the heritage protection has really helped conserve a lot of these places, and it functions. We function with that. Aboriginal cultural heritage is also recognised in the tentative list submission, and as Trevor's outlined, the stories absolutely embedded throughout this process. So First Peoples rights are really elevated. We do get asked about national park status as to whether that's required for World Heritage, and it isn't. It's quite a different thing. This is looking at heritage controls, not national park status. So that's not something that would happen through this process. And one of the stakeholder groups that we've had a lot of association with from the very beginning, the Prospectors and Miners Association Victoria, as well as individual prospectors who aren't part of that association, have had a lot of input into this process going forward. And because of their advocacy, I think very much, as well as the fact that their story is part of the story that we're telling in this region, we've been able to make sure that that miners' right is front and centre, in fact, in 6 places listed in the tentative listing submission, and will be in the nomination as well. And prospecting itself as an activity is recognised as a continuing low impact activity in black and white now, listed up on the UNESCO website. And we know that it's really managed quite well in most instances here. Already in places like the Castlemaine Diggings, which has a National Heritage listing, you know, the majority of that park still has live prospecting going on. It's very low impact and is, you know, part of what tells this story about gold and discovering gold in the region. Thanks, Lana. One of the activities that we've been doing, as was mentioned earlier when we spoke about the timeline, is developing up a bit of a master plan as to how we will bring benefits to communities across this region. We have our vision here, which is about doing that. That's the primary focus, as well as conserving and telling the story of this heritage. But after talking with many communities, regional communities, we've discovered what their aspirations are, and we've got continuing conversations going on about this, as well as, you know, some places want more tourism, others don't want as many, or they want it better managed. We understand some people need particular infrastructure. Their quality of life might be a bit you know, difficult because of some of the infrastructure not being in place. So the World Heritage Bid gives us an understanding of how we can look at what's called sustainable tourism outcomes that bring benefits. And we've got a series of principles that make sure we can do that. We have the stories that we need to tell. So regardless of whether we're in a World Heritage site or not, there's this rich history across the region that we can tell, from the First Peoples, the gold mining, the rebels, the migrators and the makers that are here, that were here and are here today. So these are really important stories that we are looking to interpret across the region and share with visitors. And then we have a number of key moves and initiatives. One's World Heritage Journeys, which Trev will go into in a minute, looking at the access and amenity of our heritage sites and townships, creating signature experiences that visitors can come and do some amazing stuff across the region, and it brings them through the region, getting World Heritage ready. I mean, this is a big change and a big opportunity. So how do we make the most of that? And then promoting and raising awareness of the Victorian Goldfields, both in Australia and domestically and around the world. Thanks, Lana.
So Sue mentioned World Heritage Journeys, and we'll take you through this one slide, which is just an extract out of a very large master plan. So World Heritage Journeys was an idea conceived by UNESCO in association with National Geographic magazine, and it's an attempt to disperse people. People will be aware that often World Heritage sites are overcrowded with people. We've got a different particular issue here in Victorian Goldfields. Our goldfields are expansive across an enormous area. How do we disperse people and make sure that they go to places perhaps that they are not aware of, places that are really off the normal tourist route? So what we did was we conceived the idea that we could have a series of journeys using the existing road network, obviously, but also we have a very extensive public transport network through rail, very frequent rail services, bus services. We have an emerging range of rail trails that are being developed across the region, and we also have a huge growing influence and interest in walking and cycling tours. So what we've done here is to take all the key locations, and some of those will not necessarily have a World Heritage site in them, but they're all part of the Victorian Goldfields. So we're talking about the goldfields as a total package here. Now, these communities, in many cases, have got their own micro journeys, things that you can go and see in those places. You can go and visit those places, you can stay in them. You'll also notice that we're trying to link up the areas. So using things like the Great Ocean Road, which brings you around the southern edge of Victoria, but also brings you back into the goldfields. Or you might be entering from, say, Adelaide, and you hit a place called like Stawell, coming in from Sydney, opportunity to visit Beechworth, but you might also go across the Alps and look at areas like Omeo, which won't have a World Heritage site, but it's got an amazing gold mining heritage. So the concept is, how do we move people around? And we use the existing network, and we plug into those locations additional services and facilities. We try and get coordination between them so that people can move around, and we get information centres. We have 23 information centres across that region. How do we build those to support this whole network? So we'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Lana.
So thanks, Trevor. So this last one from me is about the need to get World Heritage ready. We know that World Heritage comes with many responsibilities, and a lot of this is about looking at sustainable tourism principles and how we can use that to benefit the region and also conserve our heritage. We know that we need to strengthen the work that we do around tourism. So how do we use tourism to protect and manage cultural and natural heritage in the region? And importantly, we're remembering that rehabilitation of country is a really important part of this bid as well. So how can tourism contribute to that? Just for example, you may have people coming from overseas who want to do conservation activities, etc., in the region, so we can tap into those kinds of things. We need to promote lots of people getting involved, empowering our local communities, providing people with the tools to be able to manage tourism really well, and promoting quality tourism. So really uplifting the area in terms of the visitor experience that we have, and making sure that we encourage responsible behaviour in our townships from tourists, because you might see some things overseas that don't look too good. We're hoping we don't have that issue here, but we have to be on the front foot to make sure that our tourists really respect our local communities as well. I'll hand back to Lana. Thanks.
Thank you. I guess we're just almost wrapping up our presentation today, and I guess I would like to just point our viewers to what we're really trying to do with the communities involved in the Victorian Goldfields and the bid. We're saying that it's a very good story for the community, and it means that our heritage places and places that mean something to you will be looked after and cared for the future. We're saying that there's ways that you can get involved in your local communities through your National Trust or through other membership organisations, historical societies, museums, to really uncover the different stories that your towns have. We're on this journey together, and we would really like your help to get World Heritage ready. We currently have a survey open to all Victorian, Australian, overseas residents to help us shape the Victorian Goldfields nomination, and really tell us your ideas about what you like about the places that you live, you visit. What are some of the things you'd like to see happen in the Victorian Goldfields? So please visit our website, have a look at our information, YouTube, complete the survey, sign up to our newsletter. We're here for you to go on this journey together. And just would like to finish with our last slide. All our details are on the screen if you would like to get in touch. We're here to help you. Thank you.